again, Countdown 1 technical poll is complete. No constraints to proceed into launch escape system arming and propellant load.
And there's that call out that the crew is ready. They are ready to load prop onto Dragon, so we are pushing forward towards T0. And while those suits do look great, they are also engineered to connect directly into Dragon's seats to provide communications, cooling, and the ability to pressurize if necessary.
All right, well, we did get the call out that the technical teams on the ground are ready for launch escape arming and propellant loading. Again, things starting to pick up, things really starting to feel real. Let's jump down real quick to the team at Kennedy, see if you guys are just as excited. I can't sit still right now. It's starting to feel real.
Yeah, it's hard to sit still in here, right, Leland?
Rocket fuel going through my veins still.
I know. It's so awesome when we see them sitting there in their suits. We're less than an hour away now. So far, things look like we might make it. So I want to ask you what it was like the first time you put on a spacesuit when you knew you were going to space.
Oh, that was February of 2008. We were in the ONC building getting the pumpkin suits on. A little bit different than the SpaceX SpaceX suits, but it was kind of surreal, and to think that all of these. I took 10 years of training to fly in space. It took me 10 years from when I got in the Corps in 1998 to flying in February of 2008. So it was a long road to get there, but it was so worth it and so sweet. And learning how to use the green apple, the connections for oxygen, for cooling, much different than these suits that we have here with SpaceX. And so it's a lot more complicated to go through that whole series of things that you have to do to make sure you're safe in the suit. But we've evolved, we're ready, and they look so cool and calm and collected in their suits and in the vehicle. They're focusing and getting ready to fly in space.
And there's so much excitement around the center. I know, Leland, you've been getting some messages. You got another message from another astronaut.
Yeah, Sunny Williams. Okay, so Sunny,
kind of the best.
She's
awesome.
commercial crew also.
She was one of the original cadre. She was one of the original 4 who trained with Bob and Doug from the beginning of the commercial crew program.
And she's one of my classmates. Look at her there. What is she wearing?
She is. Hey,
The
Sunny.
meatball!
I forgive you, Sunny.
No, she had the worm on Wednesday, so she wore the meatball today. So
She's the best.
But now she can wear the worm ball, I guess.
Yes.
The worm ball, yeah, she can mix it up. But yeah, Sunny's awesome. She's training to fly on the Boeing Starliner in the not too distant future. So really glad she's watching and showing some love. So thanks a lot, Sunny, for sending that note. And again, we're looking at a live view of the Crew Dragon on top of a Falcon 9 rocket. You can see the crew access arm to the right of your screen. That's the hallway that Bob and Doug walked down to get into the White Room, which was the last place we saw them standing up before they climbed inside Dragon. And again, a wider shot there of Launch Complex 39A, where we are inside of an hour from liftoff, and I think we're just a couple minutes away from the poll we're going to hear before they start propellant load. Again, a 2-stage rocket there. And gosh, you guys, the weather looks not that bad. I mean, obviously that is not an official forecast, but it doesn't look quite as bad as it did Wednesday. We've got a little bit better odds. So there's the countdown clock.
Helium.
We're going to pause to listen to that comm. If you're just joining us, we're less than 50 minutes from the scheduled liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket carrying Crew Dragon. And if we start to hear any kind of update on weather or polling, we will pause to listen in for that. But if things go as scheduled, we should be hearing the launch director verify go for propellant load at about T-minus T-minus 45 minutes. So we're going to send it over to Hawthorne to carry the ball. John Instrucker or Jesse, are you there?
This weather is go at this time.
Dragon copy, go weather.
And there you heard that call out. So far, we have good weather. We are go for launch today. This is getting really exciting. I don't know about you, Dan, but my heart is beating pretty fast right now.
Yeah, we've been waiting for those words since Wednesday.
Oh, yeah.
And we did hear a call to the crew, just in case you missed it, that they were only tracking one final weather constraint. It was the cumulus cloud rule. They were expecting it to clear up within 10 minutes, and it's cleared up now. So we are currently go on weather.
Yes, and it's been pretty incredible to be so close to launch, and the road leading up to this point has been pretty incredible as well.
It has been. It's been a partnership between NASA and SpaceX. We've been working together since SpaceX started flying cargo to the International Space Station, now getting ready to launch crew. And we've been really fortunate to work with not only a lot of international partners on the International Space Station, but a lot of
And as a
really great
reminder, here in
companies.
the control room, we'll be closing doors here once we start with propellant load. Any last minute bio breaks, please go ahead and accomplish those in the next few minutes.
And the launch director just getting the teams ready. We'll be coming up on that propellant loading again. That starts at about 35 minutes prior to liftoff, so in about 12 minutes from now. There's going to be a go, no go coming up really soon. So let's go over to our man, John I, for the latest. John?
It's T-minus 47 minutes, 24 seconds. We're continuing to count down. As you just heard, the launch director and launch team are preparing for the readiness for launch poll. Now, the launch director is currently checking with Dragon mission director and NASA launch manager for their readiness. And actually, it sounds like everybody is good there. The launch director will then ask the team, he'll tell them the poll is open, and the 13 members of the SpaceX launch team will be electrically polled for their go to load propellant, as well as continue all the way to launch. Now, we will hear that poll results and a briefing from the launch director at about T-minus 45 minutes. The good news right now is that the weather is go. Conditions that were red shortly a while ago at T-minus 1 hour have cleared.
Yeah, because if it ain't that hard, you be doing it. You be doing it. Don't tell me it ain't that hard, 'cause I know how hard it is.
Where, as the weather forecaster said, cautiously optimistic. Currently, the
Poll
probability...
is complete. We're go for propellant load.
Well, we got an early call out there.
Launch control clear to retract the access arm on time. Remember that, arming access arm retract at T-minus 45 minutes.
Got an early call from SpaceX launch director Mike Taylor that the poll is go. He also heard the direction T-minus 45 minutes to prepare for retract of the crew arm. As we hear more discussion, we'll stop and let you listen in, but right now, weather for liftoff, ground level winds are good, 10 to 15 miles an hour, well with
Sound like a tin man. He tight. Tight, because once you said what you have for the two big boy, big. I mean, man, 20, one of them 27, the other one 3. But I want to come with 10 years. I've been in this bed 11 years now. I used to do remodel home.
limits. Upper altitude balloons show that conditions are acceptable. The red weather conditions have cleared up, the last one being cumulus clouds. And the probability of violation is set at 30% right now, so that's 70% chance of good weather. We're continuing to watch. There is about a less than 10% chance of lightning. We're also watching the abort corridor off of the Atlantic coast. In case, for example, at stage separation, Dragon had to abort into the ocean. The conditions there are acceptable. There has not been lightning lately. The weather, winds are good, light rain. It is go, but NASA is going to continue to watch those conditions.
T-minus 45 minutes and counting. Reminder on hold and launch escape protocol. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD, and they will approve aborting launch auto-sequence and proceed to launch abort. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control will immediately abort the launch auto-sequence and proceed to the launch abort auto-sequence. Operators shall also advise launch director whether structural break or fire is imminent or occurring for Dragon manual escape flight rules. A reminder on fire alarm instructions. In the event of a fire alarm, key operators previously briefed will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personal safety is threatened, evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly outside. At this time, weather is...
You can see on screen where it's 40. Crew director is given the final brief to the crew, and we will be beginning propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes. So right now at Falcon 9, we're ready to get into propellant loading. Dragon crew getting configured, set up. The arm is pulling away. The range is go for launch. They continue to monitor the air and the sea space. Everything looks good. And we finally have gotten green across the board on the weather conditions, but we can't take a deep breath quite yet. We're going to have to watch the weather all the way down to T0, both here at Kennedy Space Center and out in the Atlantic in the abort zones. Now earlier we saw many of you following the launch from the United States on our hotspot map. Now that we're inside an hour, we're seeing large numbers of folks logging on, tuning in from coast to coast and around the world. So we'd like to know, is this your first time watching a launch live, not counting Wednesday? And if not, how many have you seen before? Tell us using the hashtag LaunchAmerica from your favorite social media platform. And with that, at T-minus 42 minutes, 50 seconds, conditions are go, and we are counting down for an on-time launch. Let's send it back over to Kennedy Space Center as the action begins to pick up on the pad.
Dragon, SpaceX, you are go for Section 7, close visors, and arm launch escape system.
We will put Section 7 in work, visors coming close.
All right, the countdown clock is continuing to tick. My heart is continuing to beat 5 million beats a second, and we are getting so close.
Dragon in 7.2, visors are closed, we're arming launch escape system.
Copy.
And as you just heard, the crew is arming the launch escape system. That is one of the absolute last big milestones prior to liftoff, other than nominal Falcon operations. So just a minute ago, we saw the crew access arm retract, and obviously we just heard on the comms, Bob and Doug getting ready to arm the launch escape system, and so that is something that protects them all the way to orbit. So when fueling starts at about T-minus 35 minutes, so just over 6 minutes from now, they will have the capability to abort, to separate from Falcon 9 either on the pad or even after liftoff. That's a critical safety capability. And we are going to go over to Hawthorne now to take us through these next minutes. Jesse?
Section, switch into nitrogen, switch into nitrogen.
And we did hear that call out that they are arming the launch escape system, so very exciting. SpaceX has designed Crew Dragon and Falcon 9 to be the safest launch system ever flown. So we brought back Nick Picone, SpaceX's Nick Picone, to talk more about this again. Thanks for coming back and joining us today, Nick.
Hey Jesse, happy to be here. Still monitoring the launch here with our recovery and ground operations teams.
Awesome. And Nick was our mission manager for our in-flight abort test earlier this year and now works on the Starlink team. Nick, on Wednesday you talked about the launch escape system. Could you just give us a brief summary today for those that are joining today?
Sure. So the launch escape system again is our ultimate safety feature to keep Bob and Doug safe in the event of a major Falcon anomaly on the pad. The system is designed to automatically fire if either vehicle detects a dangerous condition developing. If that happens, Dragon will use its 8 Super Draco engines to push the capsule off and away to a safe distance away from this Falcon. This capability is absolutely critical. It's what keeps the crew safe, and we're now active and armed on the pad with it protecting the crew.
And as you mentioned, the launch escape system allows the Dragon to separate and get away from the vehicle. I believe it goes into the ocean. What happens after it lands safely in the ocean?
Correct. So for most of our failure modes, the successful end state is Dragon deploying parachutes, splashing down safely in the ocean. But since a launch escape can happen while the vehicle's on the pad or anywhere in flight up through orbit, it could be splashing down right off the coast of Cape Canaveral. It could be splashing down thousands of miles away in the North Atlantic. If that happens, to make sure we can get to Bob and Doug as quickly as possible, the Space Force's 45th Space Wing, Task Force 45, has pararescue teams staged and ready all around the world, ready to drop in and rescue Bob and Doug as soon as possible.
And you mentioned that the launch escape system will keep them safe all the way up to orbit. What other options are there after Dragon is in orbit?
Sure. So if for any reason we're unable to dock to the International Space Station, we have several pre-planned return trajectories, which will bring the capsule down to a splashdown point close to shore, where NASA and SpaceX recovery forces will be waiting to recover them. It'll look like an otherwise totally normal recovery operation, except for the early end of mission. This operation is something we're doing with one of 2 identical crew recovery ships. We do that because the landing sites, we want to maintain as much flexibility as possible. There could be changing weather conditions that bring down one site and leave the other one up. So we have those 2 identical ships, one in the Atlantic, one in the Gulf of Mexico, and our space operations team can redirect the spacecraft to go to whichever site is the safest option for the crew at that time.
And with the vehicle, in almost any scenario, it sounds like the vehicle will land into the ocean. And it may look like a gentle landing into the ocean, but it's a pretty dynamic event happening. And you mentioned there are teams that are ready to go and rescue the vehicle and the astronauts on board. How do you prepare for something like that, especially with so many different scenarios that could happen?
Sure. So we're lucky to have had about a decade of recovery experience with Cargo Dragon 1 in our previous trips to the International Space Station. That, along with our booster recovery missions, we've got a great team of recovery operators here who have a lot of offshore experience with our spacecraft. The system, though, that we took that experience, we built up a new crew recovery ship, 2 identical crew recovery ships, I should say, which have a lot of those lessons learned baked into the design of that ship and the operations. These new ships have complete medical facilities, an operational helipad, and redundant communications, power, and propulsion to make sure they're robust and ready for anything we encounter offshore. We've also done tons of training exercises with SpaceX team, the NASA team, and the rescue forces I mentioned earlier, practicing capsule recovery, emergency scenarios where we have to get the crew out of the capsule while they're still in the water, as well as those helicopter evacuations, taking off and landing from the pad many times so that we make sure the team is ready to do that. They're all staged and ready. They feel ready to support, and will be ready to call on us if anything goes wrong today.
Awesome. It sounds like Bob and Doug are in some really good hands and will be safe no matter what occurs on the vehicle. So thank you, Nick, for joining us again, for walking us through all of those details. I hope you're just as excited as we are for our launch coming up here very, very shortly now. So we're going to send it over to KSC to Lauren.
Thank you, Jesse. So as you just heard, fueling is about to begin at T-minus 35 minutes. We are about 50 seconds away from that. And so we're getting really, really close to the first launch of astronauts into orbit from American soil since 2011. The launch escape system is armed, which, as you know, happens before fueling, and Dragon propellant load, that's the propellants that are inside of the Dragon capsule, not the rocket. Prop load for Dragon took place weeks ago and just a few miles down the road in what we call Dragonland, and those propellants, they are MMH, or monomethyl hydrazine, which is the fuel that we use. It's hypergolic fuel, and NTO, or nitrogen tetraoxide, that's the oxidant oxidizer. Those two come together and they ignite in space to propel the vehicle. You don't need that T-TEB or a third thing to ignite because hypergolic propellants don't require it. You just need the fuel and the oxidizer. As you just heard, propellant load has started on Falcon 9, and that's awesome. All right, so that bipropellant system feeds all of the engines on Dragon. So Dragon has 12 service section engines in each, so there's 3 in each quad, 3, 3, 3, and 3. Those are used for on-orbit maneuvering for Dragon. There's also 4 additional Dracos that are underneath the nose cone for large delta V maneuvers that the vehicle will perform. But the engines that Nick Pacone was talking about earlier are Super Draco engines. We have 2 in each quad of the vehicle, so 8 total, and those are bigger engines with a high flow propellant system, and those are what lift Dragon off of Falcon 9 in the unlikely event of emergency that requires us to get off of Falcon. Now, you probably remember, let's see, Mercury, Apollo, Soyuz, they have that big pointy tower on top. That's the launch escape system for those vehicles. It's actually just another rocket on top of the spaceship that lifts the vehicle off. In the case of Dragon, our escape system is integrated into the vehicle completely. And so that's just better from one less thing you have to jettison every single flight. But it also allows us to have escape capability from the pad before T0 all the way through to orbit. And so even if the very last minute, if we needed to get off of stage 2 while we're in space, we could actually escape to orbit. So yeah, that's the escape system for little baby Dragon here.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks for walking us through that, because I think it's really important that people understand that critical safety capability, and that's the whole point when we hear that launch escape system is armed. What that means is that in an instant, they can separate from Falcon 9, shoot up into the air, and they can splash down safely in the Atlantic Ocean under Dragon's parachutes, and it was designed to do that. So now that fueling is underway, it's been going on for about 2 minutes now, so they have that safety capability ready to go on standby in an instant if they need it. And so we want to go over to Hawthorne now for an operational update from John Insprucker. John?
Oxygen fuel in stage 2 fuel, all flow rates tracking nominally.
T-minus 32 minutes, counting down. These final minutes, everything's still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon for an on-time launch. Falcon 9 did begin propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes at planned. Now on the Falcon 9, we use a fuel and oxidizer as the propellants that power it. The fuel is commonly known as RP1. That's rocket propellant grade 1 kerosene. The oxidizer is densified liquid oxygen, also called LOX. Densified means it is kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles. This allows for more oxidizer to be loaded into the first and second stages. Now with the fuel and oxidizer on hand, we need an ignition source to complete that fire triangle, as we call it. For this, Falcon 9 uses a fluid called T-TEB. It ignites in the presence of oxygen and gives off a green-colored flame. Now it's hard to see on the first stage ignition due to the water that will be spraying on the pad, but you might just see the green flare as the second stage engine ignites following stage separation over 2.5 minutes into flight. Now currently first stage fuel tank is about 10% full. The first stage, as a reminder, as you look on the left side of your screens, the first stage is the long white cylinder at the bottom, topped off by the black cylinder, so over 2/3 of the rocket is that first stage. So the fuel tank is getting loaded. We're also loading the liquid oxygen into the first stage also. The second stage, which is the top 1/3 between the Dragon and the black cylinder, that's the white second stage, that is being loaded with fuel right now. That's about 8% loaded at this moment. Liquid oxygen loading is going to begin on second stage at T-minus 16 minutes 30 seconds. Liquid oxygen loading will continue on both stages all the way down to the last few minutes of the count. We're also loading helium into pressure vessels on the stages. That's used to pressurize tanks in flight as the propellant is pulled out by the strong Merlin turbo pumps. On board the Dragon spacecraft, astronauts are monitoring systems while the propellant is loaded into Falcon 9. While we mentioned we had trained them with sounds that we had recorded on board. They've been through most of a propellant load, and they are now experiencing those sounds and vibrations.
Stage 1, ground helium load
Continues to
started.
report no problems. They are go to support launch. Weather, the last of the red conditions cleared up about 15 minutes ago. Everything is marginal but acceptable on the weather. We'll continue to watch all the way through the countdown. Now, as a reminder, today we are now into an instantaneous launch window now that we've begun propellant loading. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity tomorrow, May 31st.
Thanks, John. For Demo 2, Bob and Doug's flight to station will take about 19 hours, and their journey is fairly similar to the trip our Cargo Dragon makes back and forth to the International Space Station, but with two noticeable differences, and that's docking and splashdown.
And as we await T-minus 0, in just under 29 minutes from now, the ground operations teams are doing a series of system checks to make sure Dragon and Falcon 9 are both ready for liftoff. And we're continuing to get live views inside the capsule with Bob and Doug, and you're now also looking in firing room 4 down there at the Cape.
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon make their ascent until the Falcon 9 first and second stage separates and sends Dragon on its way to the space station.
And at this point, mission operators will prepare Dragon for on-orbit operations, where the vehicle will execute a series of burns that gradually raise its orbit to align more closely with the space station, as you can see in this animation. And just after putting Dragon into the same orbital plane as the station, the teams will get ready for Dragon's approach and docking maneuvers.
The next Dragon will make its approach and actually dock with the space station, and this is a very different process from what we've seen with Dragon cargo deliveries in the past, which use a process called berthing. Berthing requires a spacecraft to approach the station and then stop so a crew member can maneuver the station's robotic arm to capture the spacecraft. Docking on this version of Dragon can be done autonomously with no crew on board the station. It's typically a faster process, both when arriving and leaving, but it does still require pinpoint accuracy to
Once captured, a spacecraft then gets attached to a common berthing mechanism, same type of port that we use to connect each of the modules on the station together. It's a little bit slower of a process, but the hatches are significantly larger than the docking ports, which makes them perfect for bringing up those really big cargo items.
Dragon will spend up to 120 days docked before preparing to return home. Following successful completion of Dragon's test objectives and cargo loading operations, the crew will close the cabin, perform final system checks, and configure the vehicle for undocking. Once the automated undocking sequence is complete, Dragon will complete 2 departure burns using its Draco engines, pushing it away from the space station.
Then next up on the trip, deorbit entry and landing, or splashdown, which is going to cover all the operations following that final departure maneuver. It's going to include events like the trunk separation, closing of the nose cone, a deorbit burn, and then eventually as they get into the atmosphere, the deployment of the drogue and the main parachutes, and all of that ends with splashdown right off the Florida coast. At that point, teams from SpaceX will move in with their recovery ship, grab the capsule out of the water, and work to get Bob and Doug out of Dragon after a successful mission in space. So we are 26 minutes away from launch. Fueling of Falcon 9 is continuing. Let's check in one more time down with the team at Kennedy. Murray?
All right, thanks, Dan. We are so pumped right now because things have cleared up and it looks like we might actually do this today. If you're just joining us, we are now 25 minutes, 46 seconds and counting from the first launch of astronauts to the International Space Station. from U.S. soil in 9 years. This will mark the beginning of a new era where more people will be able to fly to space than ever before. And we want to share with you the results of a poll we asked a little earlier. If you could go to the moon, now it's not where the astronauts are going today, they're going to the space station, but if you could go to the moon, would you rather visit the South Pole, where no one has been before, or the Apollo 11 landing site? And it was a pretty even split. We had 46% of you say you would go to the moon's South Pole, and 54% of you would go to the Apollo 11 landing site. I kind of side with the Apollo 11 landing site because I'm a history buff and I want to see where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin set foot. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Lauren, which place would you go?
I'm with you on that one, and I would love to go see that flag there and those footsteps, those footprints there. Still be there, right? There's no wind up
Should
there.
still be there. Leland, how about you?
I think I'm with both of you because it's just like, the meatball, the classic.
Yeah.
Going to the classic spot, and that's where all of it started. That's where all that inspiration came, even though I was an antenna engineer, not seeing it. But besides that, that's history.
And hopefully, maybe it wouldn't have to be one or the other.
That's true.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, yeah, we're going to learn more from going where we've never been before, and so we need to go to the South Pole, too. And we are thrilled to see all of you following along online. Thank you for answering our poll, and we're going to go over to Tahira, who's been monitoring all the action with less than 25 minutes to go. Tahira, I'm sure things are heating up online.
Hey Marie, I mean, you're completely right. Now that we have that go for launch, people are on the edge of their seat right now waiting on this historic moment to take flight. As you can see, photos are still coming in of just everyone around the country showing their excitement for this launch, and it's really been a touching thing to see how everyone's kept this excitement going from Wednesday's first attempt. So we just took a look at numbers, and we are now over 3 million people tuning in for this historic launch. And so for me personally, I just want to wish Bob and Doug the best of luck. This will be my own first time watching humans lift off to space from the United States, and it's just going to be a super emotional moment. For that, Marie, back to you at Kennedy for these last minutes before launch.
All right, thanks, Tahira. And Leland, we got 23 minutes and some change to go. What do you think Bob and Doug are feeling right now?
I think, they're very calm, cool, and collected as test pilots, but I think they're thinking about what are the steps they have to take if a malfunction or something happens. So the nominal stuff is all kind of automated, but if something happens where they have to intervene with those touchscreens,
Exploration is about to be launched.
LD, go for launch.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Decades in the making.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Propelled by American determination and spirit.
Sorry, we've had a problem here.
Tragedy and triumph.
Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
A new generation of spacecraft.
Dragon, separation confirmed.
A public-private partnership that will take crews to the International Space Station.
Welcome to the new era in spaceflight.
Return astronauts to the moon.
Oh, that view is tremendous.
Expand our reach through the solar system.
It's about humanity's quest for knowledge.
And continue the mission we started.
We're not ending the journey today, we're completing a chapter of a journey that will never end.
Countdown to launch starts now.
3, 2, 1.
Live Live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida and ABC News launch headquarters in New York City. Here now, Tom Yamas and Lindsay Davis.
And welcome to Launch America. We are coming to you live from ABC News headquarters in New York on an exciting day for the U.S. space program, the return of space launching from U.S. soil. It is a complicated day for the country given the unrest in so many cities, but right now our focus is on this historic launch, and so far all systems are a go, though everyone of course is watching the weather so closely again today. That is the big unknown. We'll talk to Ginger Z in a moment.
The weather going down to the wire. We are thrilled to be working with our partners National Geographic to bring you this historic live event. Liftoff scheduled for 3:22 Eastern Time, just a few minutes away. A redo of sorts from Wednesday when we got within 17 minutes of launch, only to have the mission scrubbed. Now, our team from ABC News and National Geographic spread out to cover every possible angle of this launch, and we are lucky today to be joined by two astronauts, including one who returned to Earth just 3 months ago.
And we look forward to speaking to both of them. It is the first time NASA astronauts will launch into space aboard a privately owned and operated spacecraft. And it's the first time any private company has sent astronauts into orbit. And that's why you're about to witness history. The spaceship capsule is called the Dragon, just behind me here. It sits on top of that massive Falcon 9 rocket, named after Han Solo's Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. Both the capsule and the rocket built by Maverick billionaire Elon Musk and his company SpaceX.
A U.S. launch
play, especially when we talk about the weather. I do want to bring in Katie Coleman again to talk about the moment, because we can't really forget how big this moment is. We talked a lot about this on Wednesday, but this is a huge moment for the space program and for America. You have the private company SpaceX partnering with NASA, now launching 2 astronauts into space. For you, what does this day mean?
It means everything to everyone who wants to explore further, and I think that means actually all the people on this planet. I mean, it's one more step. It's a huge one because it brings the imagination of not just a government agency, but our commercial partners as well, who can take different kinds of risks, have different kinds of ideas. I mean, this is the first step back to the moon. And we talk a lot about Bob and Doug, but I see and feel all the people that have been working on this program together for years and years, from not just SpaceX, but our other partners as well.
All right, we're going to go once again back to the weather, which is our big focus right now. All eyes on the skies out there. ABC News Chief Meteorologist Ginger Zee joins us now. What are you thinking, Ginger?
Lindsay, I finally allowed myself to get excited. And let me tell you why. We have a sea breeze to thank. Let me explain it. This is a 3-hour satellite loop. It's visible satellite. Most of the day you had these thunderstorms and rain showers moving over the Space Coast, but within the last half hour, that onshore flow, so infamous in Florida for those daily thunderstorms, it started to hold the clouds and storms at bay. So let me show you. The cloud-to-ground lightning is plenty far away. It is just the towering cumulus that have had some rain showers that the sea breeze is actually knocking down. So it's even killing it a little bit more. But even if they had a high enough top, I think that they're far enough west, about 13 miles, so outside that 10-mile periphery they're looking for, that it would be okay. Why do we not want a cumulus cloud? I thought it was just lightning. No, the tops of a towering cumulus can have a charge, and then the rocket, as it goes through the troposphere, can create a charge, and it can create something called trigger lightning. We've seen it in the past, and that's been a problem. So that's what really looks better at this hour and made me excited. All the rest of the criteria have been met from my understanding. There's certainly not any sustained winds of 30 miles per hour, and that cloud, the one that is the closest, it's dying. So Tom, I think it looks good.
Okay, that's great news, Ginger. Definitely a different sense from you of what you saw on Wednesday. So we're feeling the positive vibes. Hopefully they hold. I want to bring in Colonel Steve Ganyard now, right now, an ABC News contributor. He's a former Marine Corps fighter pilot, and he was a squadron mate of Doug Hurley, knows him pretty well. Has an interesting story about Doug Hurley's nickname. We'll talk about that a little later. But Steve, I want to talk about the stakes today because, first and foremost, we are talking about human lives. 2 Americans are in there, 2 brave Americans who are about to make history, hopefully. But also so much is at stake because this is the biggest test so far for Elon Musk and SpaceX, and anything less than a successful launch is going to be a failure.
Yeah, Tom, I think looking at this in the bigger perspective, what we see here is the triumph up to now of SpaceX in being able to drive down the cost to orbit. Back in the space shuttle days, it cost about $25,000 to put 1 pound in orbit. SpaceX has driven that down to about 1,000 pounds, and with the next generation of rockets, Musk hopes to bring that down to, say, $50 or even $5 a pound. What that's going to do is enable us to go to the stars. It's going to enable us to put colonies on the moon, for us to put colonies on Mars. And so really what we're doing here is taking one big step towards that new golden age in space exploration that will include colonization of other planets.
I'm just curious here. This is a $3.1 billion effort. So for the Earthlings down here, what does this do for us, especially at this time in our country where so many people are struggling financially, and want to understand what's the potential of this trip?
Well, some of the things that SpaceX has been able to do is they're putting up satellites, 42,000 satellites that will bring broadband to every part of the world. So places that haven't had internet before, places where we're going to be able to put satellites up that will be able to monitor the Earth, monitor the atmosphere, the environment. All sorts of things that we couldn't afford to do now become possible because it's so cheap, so inexpensive to put things into orbit. And that is Elon Musk, this larger-than-life, brilliant entrepreneur. That is his triumph.
All right, we're going to bring you right back in, but we are also joined now by National Geographic contributing writer Nadia Drake, who covers space. Nadia, talk to us about the significance of this moment.
This is the final test of a brand new spacecraft that can carry humans into orbit. And it's only the 5th time that we've seen something like this in the United States. The last time, of course, being in 1981, when Bob Crippen and John Young flew the space shuttle for the first time. And if this demonstration mission goes well, I think we are looking at the beginning of a new chapter in space exploration, where private companies can help make it easier and more affordable to get into orbit. And that's important, because if we as a species are setting our sights on living among the stars, whether that's on the moon or on Mars or beyond, then we have to get serious about sending a lot more people into space.
It is so true. All right, Nadia, thank you for that. I do want to bring in Christina back into this conversation. Christina, we know right now Doug and Bob are in that space capsule, the Dragon capsule. They are right next to each other. They have those form-fitting suits on and those new form-fitting seats inside the capsule. What's going through their mind? They probably heard the same news we heard, that the weather looks pretty good. This is a potential go for a launch. We'll know in less than 8 minutes. So what's going through their heads?
I think they're probably pretty calm. They're ready to carry out the mission that they know that they are very, very trained for and very prepared for. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little levity in the cabin. It's always good to take any opportunity you can to rib your crewmate, just to keep things light and to recognize that, you do know what you're doing and you don't have to be too serious, despite the fact that you are very focused. I think one exciting thing coming up in the countdown is they're about to switch to autonomous power. And that's when basically they're in control of their own spacecraft. And that's a big moment, because they know that they're going to be in that position, until they dock with the space station. And they're just looking forward to feeling those engines go behind them.
And Katie, you've talked to us before about how your first mission got scrubbed 7 times within the first 30 days. So, Sade has a song, it's never as good as the first time. Is that true? Do you think that they still have the same excitement and anticipation about this trip?
Yeah, I'm sitting here right now, actually, there's just this feeling.
Starting to feel it.
And there's maybe yesterday, maybe this morning, I don't know, will it launch? I guess I'll go out.
On that propellant loading, again, that starts at about 35 minutes prior to liftoff, so in about 12 minutes from now. There's going to be a go, no-go coming up really soon, so let's go over to our man, John I, for the latest. John?
It's T-minus 47 minutes, 24 seconds. We're continuing to count down. As you just heard, the launch director and launch team are preparing for the readiness for launch poll. Now, the launch director is currently checking with Dragon mission director and NASA launch manager for their readiness. And actually, it sounds like everybody is good there. The launch director will then ask the team, he'll tell them the poll is open, and the 13 members of the SpaceX launch team will be electrically polled for their go to load propellant, as well as continue all the way to launch. Now, we will hear that poll results and a briefing from the launch director at about T-minus 45 minutes. The good news right now is that the weather is go. All the conditions that were read shortly a while ago at T-minus 1 hour have cleared.
That are on the ground, I think.
We're just seeing the president right now, who has arrived there to the Kennedy Space Center to witness history, to watch this launch. As we look at the countdown clock there, just 4 minutes away, I believe that's Vice President Mike Pence standing right next to him as well. And in the distance there, we can see the Falcon 9 rocket and the Dragon capsule above it. This is definitely a difficult time for the country right now, and it is going to give us a break from everything that is happening across the country. So much unrest, so much unhappiness, so much sadness. It'll give us a reason to look up, because for so many months we have been looking down for so many reasons, the pandemic and now everything else that's going on around the country. I do want to ask you, when you take off, Katie, at what point do you feel the force? Because we're talking about 17,000 miles per hour. You can go from Miami to Los Angeles in 10 minutes. I mean, that is fast. Talk to me about just what it feels like inside that capsule.
You're on your back, and then it's this amazingly intense thrust where you just realize that you are going. It's not that you're going so fast yet, but you are just. It's so clear. You are just not stopping until you get to space.
And in these final moments, as we're just minutes away at this point from launch, what is it, less than 3 minutes to go, pull back the curtain and give us the sense of what it's like to be in that chair.
I think I don't know if they have time to put it together, but these folks know just from everything they've done pre-flight. I mean, they've shared so much with everyone because they realize they're bringing everyone with them. This is a new era in space flight. We're launching people, from another place, another capability to get to the space station, to continue that mission onto the moon and Mars. And they know they carry those people with them, and yet I think that they are they are business right there, and they're best friends. So I think there's no place better to be.
Christina, briefly, because at 3:21:50, we're going to listen to the launch commander talk about if this is definitely a go. Tell me about Doug and Bob, just real quickly. We know they're close friends and that they're family men. What else should we know about them?
The important thing to know is that they are just wonderful people. They've both been mentors to me throughout my time here. I joined in 2013. They had been here for 13 years by then, so they had a lot to convey. And they always did that in a friendly way. Had the chance to fly with us, which was great. And Bob was actually lead of the astronaut corps when I joined, so they were both just instrumental.
We're about less than a minute from hearing whether this launch is a go or a no-go. And Katie, talk to me about the prizes, because NASA and SpaceX obviously wanted 2 astronauts who were incredibly experienced. They got that in Doug and Bob, but they also wanted 2 astronauts who were going to represent sort of this first mission, if you will, into the new era of space.
Well, I think that it comes down to skills in terms of test pilots, flight test engineer. These are the skills not just to sit on a launch pad right now, but to actually develop this vehicle together with another entity that wasn't NASA. And we have the same kind of team, including our test pilot for that team is Nicole Mann. It's the same kind of team for Boeing as well.
Okay, we're going to listen in right now.
Falcon 9 is in startup. Dragon is in countdown. FTS is armed for launch.
This man was there for it, and first to tell the world on Twitter Monday night. He says this guy called authorities on this guy.
Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
He didn't want to use his name, but described what he witnessed.
It's a lot.
We just heard ready to launch. We're 30 seconds away. Katie, I see the tears in your eyes right now.
30 seconds.
Talk to us about what's going on inside.
It's a big deal for people to leave the planet. It is so hard, and so many people have come together to make this happen. And we're watching. You have to be there with them.
Stage 1 tanks pressing for flight.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
Godspeed indeed.
Vehicle pitching downrange.
Emotional moment for you right now, Katie,
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
People on the ground will hear that crackling. Feel it.
Falcon power to nominal. And 1D throttle down.
Katie and Christina, as we watch this, I'm thinking about what Bob Behnken told his family just before they left. Let's light that candle, because you see that big, beautiful rocket, clear blue skies, and just headed straight on its mission.
And 1D throttle up.
Hope triumphs over fear in a time where our country needs it. Needs to be reminded of that.
And down on the ground, they can actually feel. You can physically feel that crackling that we hear. You can physically feel that.
Our Gio Benitez is at the Kennedy Space Center right now. Behind him is where the rocket just took off from. And Gio, what are your thoughts? I mean, you were right there. You could feel it. You could hear it. Walk us through.
Start of MVAC engine chill.
Well, I just have to tell you, I'm emotional right now because this is such a moment. And to feel what Katie was talking about, feeling that moment, feeling feeling that go up into the air, and you can still sort of feel it. Extraordinary human achievement right here, and sorry for getting emotional, but it's my first launch, so there's that.
Hey, Christina, not at all your first launch. What are your thoughts as you're watching this historic moment?
I just couldn't be more thrilled. I'm thinking about how Bob and Doug feel in there and how excited they are. You know, every moment of the day was mostly the same as what they had experienced in their training sims until that takes off and you know you're going up. And at this point, they've been going up for so long, they know they're not stopping till they're in space. And that is just an incredible feeling. It's a new era where space travel isn't just limited to sovereign countries and governments. It's something that's going to be accessible for all, and it's going to be an innovative thing where we just open it up, and I can't wait to see where we go with it.
Mission confirmed.
There's first stage set.
MVAC ignition.
Katie, talk to us about what we're just watching right here. We know this is a sort of a critical moment.
It's the first stage dropping away. We call it main engine cutoff.
And explain to us exactly what's
So
happening.
basically the first stage, the first giant piece, we've used all that gas and now we're kicking it off. It's actually going to fly itself back down to the recovery ship. It goes up for another long time and then comes back down, but we'll see all that within the next few minutes.
And that was a major part of SpaceX's program, the reusable rockets.
Absolutely.
To make this, I don't want to say affordable, but to make it cost effective.
Exactly, to be able to reuse them again. And actually what they learn and making sure they understand how to make them fly back has been immense.
And Elon Musk had referred to that as part of the holy grail of spaceflight, essentially saying, why would you throw away a 747 every time that you used it? Give us a sense of what happens now. It'll not be until tomorrow. Is that in the morning or the afternoon when it's expected to dock with the International Space Station?
So this is the Dragon itself is still powering up into space. So it's still on the second stage
Dragon
engine right now.
Nominal trajectory.
Nominal trajectory I'm hearing. And so
Signal Bermuda.
And what does that mean, what we're hearing right now?
they're saying when the next abort site is. Like, so all the way up from North Carolina, basically Nova Scotia, over to Ireland, there are abort points. They are designated points that if something goes wrong, that will be the place, and there are...
Where the Dragon capsule can come off.
Exactly.
The propulsion is still nominal.
And that particular abort that's available here actually made this less risky than the initial NASA space shuttle flights.
I don't know about the numbers, but it's really, it's extremely valuable to have this kind of abort capability, not interrupted by, if it happens at this time, we couldn't quite abort. They have abort capability. They have 50 different abort sites all the way from the Cape, and from the time before they fuel. From that time, that capsule could be pulled off of the rocket, and Bob and Doug would land in the water. And now it's just a question of if that should happen, where.
SpaceX nominal trajectory.
Christina, talk to me about what Bob and Doug are doing right now inside the capsule. We can see them there on the left hand of the screen. What are they reviewing, and what are they doing at this moment?
You know, at this moment, it's really just all about the rocket. So they are probably reviewing some of the pressures and different signals that they're getting in telemetry from the rocket itself. Like Katie said, they are on the second stage, so they're going to continue to be propelled into space up until 8 or so minutes into the total flight. So they're monitoring, but monitoring isn't as simple as just looking at a couple gauges. You know, everything is vibrating. They're having a lot of G-forces on them. So even just monitoring the systems and listening to the communications is a big job as test pilots that they're doing.
You know, I'm going to ask our director, Dave DeCinti, if he can, by chance, go back to the initial liftoff when the rocket took off, when it was a go. And I want to bring him back, Colonel Steve Ganyard. Steve, your friend is Doug Hurley. He's in that capsule right now. He is headed for the cosmos. I understand when you saw the rocket take off, it was a pretty emotional moment for you as well.
It was. You know, with like Gio, it's hard not to be overwhelmed by this triumph. The number of people that came together to make this happen, and for the U.S. to be going back to space, and to think about this in the broader context of what it means for humankind to be able to go out and truly colonize, to bring in this golden age of space exploration that these guys are laying the foundation for.
Your friend Doug Hurley, I mean, he is an astronaut. Like the other astronauts we have joining us on this broadcast, he is somebody who's dedicated his life to this, and it is not an easy life. life. It is glamorous for the launches, but it is a very difficult life, and your family has to make a lot of sacrifices. Talk to us about Doug a little bit.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that just everybody would like. If you met him in a bar, he's the guy who's not too loud but loud enough where you want to hear his stories, and he's the kind of guy that anybody would love to be like, that people would want their sons and daughters to grow up like. And so he's a great role model, and I think Bob is too, from what I've heard from him. So that's part of how NASA selects its astronauts. They're not only highly capable and willing to face the dangers of traveling in space, but they're also just great people, and they're people who can help the rest of the world understand science and to appreciate the kind of science and engineering that's going into space exploration. So he's a great ambassador for NASA, as is Bob, and it's a great thing to watch.
And Steve, I got to ask you though, the nickname, Doug's nickname, you had mentioned it earlier, and the story behind that.
I'll give you a hint. Anybody that saw Wayne's World, maybe you can think back to that, but Doug and I have sort of a mutually assured destruction. We won't talk about our personal call signs together on TV. So.
All right, Colonel Steve Ganyard for us.
And I want to bring the astronauts back in. Just in his State of the Union address, President Trump in February said how necessary it is for the U.S. to be the first country to be able to plant its flag on Mars. Why is space exploration still so worth it? Not from a financial perspective, but from your perspective as astronauts.
Why is it?
Space exploration. Why is that so important? And why would President Trump say it's so important, for example, for the United States to be the first country to plant their flag on Mars?
It's about people. And people, having gone to space, I always thought that space was somewhere else. And then once you get there, you realize that Earth is just bigger than you thought. Home is bigger than we thought. And our place is this universe. And exploring further and further and further is what we do. It will be individual countries that lead this, and yet we will be doing it together.
And Christina, wanted to bring you back in as well. It seemed like you wanted to answer that question, but also you can do that. Also curious, just to give us a sense for most of us who have never been on the International Space Station, what they're about to be greeted by.
Well, it's an amazing feeling when you come through that hatch, because the first thing you see is the face of someone that you trust, a crew member who you know has got your back. And finally, after being, in a small capsule of blackness of space on your way there for many, many hours, and in their case, almost 20 hours, they know they're home, and they know that they're going to be well taken care of. And, you start right away learning how to live this new life in microgravity on board a space station, carrying out your tasks and duties. And so it'll be interesting to see them make that shift from kind of test pilots to being in it for the long haul. And I know they're going to do an awesome job.
Katie, you wanted to make a point here too.
I was just hearing some awesome words, nominal orbital insertion.
What does that mean?
It means that they've gotten to space and they're in orbit.
All right, so that is a major moment here. They have entered space. If you've been watching the broadcast on the right hand of the screen, we are getting feeds in from SpaceX and from NASA. What we just saw right there, I don't know if the moment just happened, but it looks like the rocket booster just re-landed, right?
That was the booster.
That was the booster. That's incredible. It just launched into space, and it just came down, and that was also a successful landing onto the ship, because just before that it wasn't there.
And I'm going to correct here that I think that we're calling that they're looking at a nominal orbital insertion.
Okay.
Because in 1 minute, less than 1 minute from now, we're talking about separation. Explain to us what that process is.
So that means that we're actually going to be done using the second stage, and Dragon will actually separate.
We have a very, it's a nice model, but I'm saying this is basic. It's not a Skywalker Ranch right here. But you have the Falcon rocket here, and you have the Dragon capsule, and this essentially comes off, and it takes off from there.
Exactly.
And Doug and Bob aren't here, and they're going from here straight to the space station.
That's correct.
And this is not that large, right? The capsule itself is not that large.
It's larger than what you think of for, Apollo, Gemini, but it's a small place, but it can seat 4. They've got 2 people in it, and the bottom part of that is actually going to stick with it, but they're actually living in the top sort of more triangular part there.
And it's a throwback to the older missions, right? The bringing back of the capsule, if you will.
Physics doesn't change.
Right.
Curious to get both of your perspectives. Christina, if you'll jump in here too. What you love most about being in space? What you love most about this moment that they're feeling right now and beyond?
Well, the thing I loved most personally throughout my mission was being able to contribute and give back. It's something I've held in such high regard my entire life, so to be able to actually work on it day in and day out was just such a privilege. The moment that they're in right now is unforgettable. They're floating out of their seats a little bit for the first time. They're in microgravity. Of course, they've experienced that before, but for me, it was my first time, and I looked over at my crewmate, Nick Hague, who was also a rookie at it, and we smiled at each other, and we knew we had gotten there. It's also maybe their first time to take a peek out the window, if they have access to that, to see Earth, which is another just phenomenal moment. But probably for a little while, they're going to be monitoring those systems. This is a big checkout period where they're making sure comm, navigation, and all that is working as expected. So despite that, they're pretty happy.
Okay, let's listen in.
Dragon separation confirmed.
Separation confirmed. Big smiles from both of you here.
Countdown 1 is unmerged.
This is an incredible moment right here. SpaceX, 2 astronauts, a private company, along with NASA. I know we are still very far from mission accomplished, but so far, where we are right now in this part of the mission, incredible.
This is the safest place. If you're not down here on Earth, this is the safest place to be.
Dragon, Chief Engineer on Dragon to ground. Bob Doug, on behalf of the entire launch team, thanks for flying with Falcon 9 today. We hope you enjoyed the ride and wish you a great mission.
We won't be able to hear from you.
Congratulations to you and the F9 team for the first human ride for Falcon 9, and it was incredible. Appreciate all the hard work, and thanks for the great ride to space.
Happy all.
All right, like proud of you guys and the rest of the team. Thank you so much for what you've done for us today, putting America back into low Earth orbit from the Florida coast.
Copy all. Good luck and Godspeed.
Godspeed. So next, they're going to stay for a minimum of 1 month, a maximum of just over 100 days. Give us a sense of what the mission is now.
Right now, they're getting ready for the rendezvous. So tomorrow is when they dock. I tell people 8.5 minutes to get to space and about a day and a half or so to parallel park, right? So they're going to approach the space station, and before they do that, or while they're doing that, we're actually really, this is still a test mission. Every single minute of it is a test mission, and they've got some, well thought out tests to understand, does this vehicle behave like we thought it would? Can everybody have the right information at the right time? And does everything look good for docking? So there's a lot to do between now and tomorrow morning when they will actually dock with the space station. And it's kind of like a ballet up in space. They'll be sort of like catching up with the space station. They're in orbit a little lower than the space station, and so they go around a little faster, and then they will actually do a burn to catch up with the station. And that ballet happens over the next 19 hours.
Christina, talk to us about Doug and Bob right now inside of that capsule. Are they navigating the capsule, or essentially is it on autopilot being controlled and they're sort of worrying about everything else?
It should be on autopilot. One thing about the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule is that it could be completely automated throughout the mission, including rendezvous and docking. And it is the first of its kind to actually do that. Now, they do have the ability to take over manually, and because this is a test mission, they're actually going to practice that ability and test it out both near and far from the International Space Station. So they're not necessarily driving, but they're paying very close attention to how those automated systems are responding. As you can imagine, when it just pops off of the end of the rocket, there's no guaranteed orientation or attitude. It has to use all of its systems to figure out where it is in space, how it's oriented in space, and make sure that it's, belly down and nose forward going around the Earth. And so Bob and Doug are making sure that all those systems are working great. They're ready to react in the case that anything doesn't go as expected. And hopefully they're just watching all those systems come online nominally, even including the life support systems. They're in a closed loop life support system situation right now. Everything just went through a lot of vibrations on launch, so hopefully they're just watching everything come up nominally.
We actually also have that moment we spoke about earlier, the reusable rocket that we heard you mention. It landed back on a ship at sea, and we have the video. We want to show that to you now because this was one of the selling points for NASA and SpaceX. They promised they could do this. It took them a while, but they figured it out, and I think we do have that clip. If Dave DeCinti can show it to us now. This was just the moment right after it landed back on that ship, and you can still see some of the the thrusters there as we see some of the smoke come off the bottom of the rocket. But an incredible moment, an incredible technology. And Katie, as you watch this, does SpaceX impress you more and more as you've sort of seen their journey from once they got into the space race and what we've seen today?
Absolutely. I mean, I love that they bring things that are new ways of thinking, new ways of doing, and, they and the NASA team have figured out a way to work on this together, which, takes, I think, being brave enough to say, this is what we see, this is what we can do, and NASA going, well, that is a different way, and vice versa. And so it's a pretty cool partnership, and yet it actually paves the way for other partnerships as well.
And Steve Ganyard, wanted to bring you back in just to get a sense of what that partnership means, and was it necessary, in your opinion, for spaceflight to reinvent itself for the 21st century?
Yeah, I think if Elon Musk were with us right now, he would tell you that SpaceX has stood on the shoulders of NASA. And to Katie's point previously, this is a public-private partnership. So you're taking the best of government and the best of the private sector, and together, that's the triumph here today. This is the triumph that's going to drive the cost, increase the safety, reliable launch to orbit, that's going to allow us to put colonies on other planets. So to do that, we require the best from the private sector, the best from the government, and that's how we got to this launch today, and that's what the future will be.
And give us a sense just again of why NASA is no longer launching astronauts itself. I mean, why involve private firms?
Yeah, government. If we look at the COVID response, right, not great. So if we leave things exclusively to government, they aren't as agile. If you go to the private sector, they're faster, quicker, better, cheaper. But you need government in something like this, where big science, very expensive big science is involved. And so this partnership between NASA and SpaceX, and in the future, there's lots of other companies that are involved here. It's not just SpaceX. We have Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin coming along here. He's nipping at the heels of Elon Musk. And Jeff Bezos is spending $1 billion with a B of his own money to get to the moon. And you have these competing visions where Elon Musk wants to go and put a colony on Mars, and Jeff Bezos wants a colony on the moon. And so you have these two entrepreneurs, the richest guy in the world and the 31st richest guy in the world, who are putting their own money down to secure a personal legacy, to secure a personal dream that most of the rest of the world shares, and that is to get to space and create colonies and explore new worlds and advance science.
Rewatching that launch, it just does not get old. But Katie, you wanted to comment.
Well, just I think with all these companies and the partnerships with government, government has the public trust. We are the shepherds of the taxpayers' dollars. And then you have these innovative companies who can actually take bigger risks, not with people, but with hardware. And by them being able to say, well, let's try it this way, something that would be a little bit harder for the less flexible bureaucracy of the U.S. To do. By doing that, they actually go several steps ahead, and it brings everybody with them. And that's the general principle that we're using to basically get to Mars faster.
How has the marriage been, though? Because you do really have sort of two very different spouses in NASA and Elon Musk. Yeah, right? Yeah. How has this marriage worked, and what is the real story? Results matter. There are results right now. We're watching them up close. But how has that been? Because you have the rebel billionaire and you have the by-the-book agency.
Well, I like to look at even what we've seen in the press conferences, the way these people talk to each other. You can tell that they have figured themselves out. That they have figured out how to forge relationships. And part of it is, I think, that the mission is the same. The mission is to explore and to go further and to build the hardware and make sure that basically, a diverse bunch of people can get to go and not just a few. And I think when they focus on that, I see the bridges between individual disciplines, and even, they're watching movies together during the quarantine. They had the flight control team, SpaceX and NASA were watching. I call them boy movies. I think there's a show, Bob and Doug McKenzie. I think that was a favorite.
And Christina, curious if we can just kind of piggyback on that. Your thoughts on space tourism and the idea of should space just be open for people who have experience, or come one and all?
So they're going to continue under the power of the...
I am definitely in the come one and all camp, and I think that's the prevailing theory right now. NASA's job was to incubate this until it was ready for release into the private sector, until it was commercially viable, and that's when it's better to hand it off to
companies like SpaceX. So the NASA has set its sights on parts of this that may not quite yet be commercially viable to get them to those points. That's things like going back to them this decade and eventually on to Mars. So I say anyone who's curious, anyone who has a desire to dream, to carry humanity's dreams with them into space and to share it when they get back, to contribute to the science on the frontiers, I welcome them, and that's why this era that we're starting today is so exciting.
And Katie, we talked about that they won't actually attach to the International Space Station until tomorrow. How long is this portion of the flight?
This portion, meaning until they get to the space station?
Right.
It's, I think 19 hours is the total. And so they're gonna actually get a chance once they're doing a lot of things right now, checking out things. As Christina was saying, there's a lot of shaking that goes on. You want to make sure everything's still in good shape. But after they're done with a bunch of tests, they'll probably take their suits off. They've got food up there. There's enough room to move around. Eventually, the astronauts will go to bed.
So you will sleep. So, I mean, Tom actually brought this up about, is this kind of riding itself at a certain point on autopilot, but they'll both go to sleep at the same time, or it's one person is always
Someone's on watch.
Yeah.
Well, as I understand it, the plan is to sleep at the same time. I mean, there's a timeline that says you'll sleep, and actually being ready for that critical, I'm being funny about it, but being ready for that critical operation of docking is imperative. And they've had a long day, and so when sleep's your job, that's what you'll do. And at the same time, they've got alarms inside the vehicle there. I'm sure they're going to be watching, but the ground is watching them as well.
You know, Christina, I know you set the record for the longest time in the space station by a woman, nearly a year. Incredible. And one of the research projects you worked on was what sort of being in space that long does to the human body. What did you figure out? What did you learn? And why on this mission with Doug and Bob is there sort of a sliding scale? It could be a few months or it could be 110 days. Explain that.
Sure. Well, some of the things that we're looking to find out is what is normal for the human body after up to a year in space, and hopefully longer eventually as we're going to looking to architectures for Mars missions. But I think what we find is what things sort of plateau in terms of your physiological changes, and what things maybe keep getting different and keep adapting that we have to maybe watch and come up with new countermeasures for. Our exercise program is excellent, so we keep that cardiovascular and muscular health going, but there are always new things to learn when we extend those missions. For Bob and Doug, I think there are a couple different factors that affect when they can come home. One is the readiness of the next vehicle. It's obviously still going through some of its final, phases of its construction and delivery, so we'll see how that pans out. Obviously, right now the goal is late August, I believe. And then also things like, are the solar arrays going to perform better or worse than expected? That could change its maximum possible duration. There's operational requirements and constraints. Are they going to do some spacewalks, get some new batteries installed? And then simply weather. When they come home, there's a lot more weather sites to check for all the different possible landing sites. So there's kind of a few different factors that we're playing. And what I love is that NASA is nimble enough to play with those factors and recognize we don't have to pin it down right now. We can be flexible and nimble. And to see that developing as we work with our private partners is pretty exciting.
And Katie, wanted to bring back the point that Doug and Bob are both dads, and you had a 10-year-old son who's now 19, but you were still able to communicate with him every night. I mean, give us a sense of the regimen and how you're able to stay in contact with home.
With the same kind of way we can actually see the astronauts right now and talk to them, we can actually call our families for, at least 40 minutes of every hour if we wanted to, if you could, all day long, which nobody has time for that. But I spoke to my family every day except for 3 in almost 6 months. And so we get to talk to them. We used to have video conferences once a month, once a week. It might be a little bit better than that. But you find ways to be in touch and be together. My son and I used to read stories.
And I think we have some video. You brought your flute up with you into space, and in a moment we're gonna play that. There we go. The first ever duet from space and on the ground. Tell us about this moment.
This is with Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, and I loved the fact that he brought the flute to rock music, and he sort of brought a whole bunch of people with him, including me. And so I wrote to him and just said, I'm going to go to the space station on a little business trip, and I wonder if I could take your flute with me. On the day on the day of this duet, he was in Perm, Russia, playing a concert. It was the April 12th, 2011, the 50th anniversary of human spaceflight. He was in Russia. I was living on the space station, and we played this duet together.
Well, incredibly cool. And I gotta think, even though you have a whole nation behind you and rooting you on in space, at moments it has to get so lonely, and you do have to cut loose and whip out the jazz and just go wild, right? I mean, after you're up there for so long.
Well, the big secret is that people feel badly for us when they have these images of capsule, but that space station is like 10 school buses without the seats in them, all connected together at different angles. I mean, it's huge and giant. It's filled with science experiments that can't be done down here, and it's the most amazing place to live. I would have stayed another 6 months in a minute.
I'd like to bring Gio Benitez back in. And Gio, it's quite a different scene than it would be outside of a pandemic. Certainly you would have many people who are watching. Give us a sense of what you are observing there from on the ground, and if you're able to kind of give us a read on the energy there.
People were just so excited, Lindsay, just so excited. They've cleared out, but this whole lawn here was packed with people as people were just watching this launch. By the way, I gotta just say, Katie and Christina, they're incredibly modest, but you know how they tell us, oh, you should know a little bit about everything? Well, astronauts need to know a lot about everything. They are just the smartest people that I've interviewed so far, because they go in with some expertise, and then they have to know a little bit about everything, including how to do their own surgery, because they're obviously alone there on that ship, on that International Space Station. By the way, I should tell you that tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, that is when they are expected to dock at the ISS, and at 12:45 p.m. Eastern, that is when they are going to do that hatch opening into the International Space Station, and that's where they have the welcome ceremony.
Gio, could you sense the pressure from speaking with so many NASA staffers and being in those news conferences? Could you sense the pressure that, all eyes were on this launch? It had to be a successful mission for a variety of reasons, of course, because we had 2 Americans aboard the capsule, but also just to push forward the space program in America, because there are some very ambitious projects down the road.
Incredibly ambitious projects. We are talking about, I spoke with the NASA administrator, and he said that one of the projects he's most excited about is the idea of 3D printing organs. Can you imagine what that would mean for healthcare? That is something that you could do in the microgravity of space that you can't necessarily do here on Earth. So no doubt about it, they wanted this to succeed, and they wanted to make sure, though, that Bob and Doug were both safe as they did it.
And curious if you're aware of this story, Katie, you probably are. I guess there was an American flag that flew on the first ever space shuttle. Tell us about that, because now it sounds like there was a race grab, like who was going to bring it back? Was it going to be SpaceX?
Exactly. So on the last shuttle flight, that flag actually went up to the space station and was, Doug did, Doug and his commander, Chris Ferguson, who is the commander of the Boeing launch that will be coming soon, right? And so here's the commander and pilot vying for whose spacecraft, commercial partner spacecraft, will be up there first to then retrieve that flag and bring it back home.
SpaceX.
So I guess that, you don't like to say it's done till it's done, but it's looking pretty good for SpaceX.
I want to ask Christina, we're talking about docking with the International Space Station aboard a private rocket ship and a private spaceship. How much harder now is the next step, is getting back to the moon on a privately owned and operated ship?
Well, obviously there's a lot of new technologies that are going to be developed, but I think one of the big hurdles is actually forming those partnerships and defining how we talk about requirements and meeting the NASA safety standards when we have private companies actually designing and building the spacecraft. So we've really overcome the biggest procedural hurdles to that. And the other part is just having that collective drive, having, a unified desire to go. I think we've overcome that hurdle as well, and I think it's going to actually what goes back to this decade.
And give us a sense also, because we've heard that the International Space Station is about the size of, a football field. There's 6 different living quarters on there, big bay window. I've only read about it, but you've both experienced it.
So it is, if you laid it out on a football field, it would go end to end, and that's where the sort of outside and solar arrays are. We actually live kind of along the 50-yard line, and it is those sort of like 8 or 10 modules that I talked about, school bus size, some pointing up, some pointing down, all in a row. And in the middle is what we call the cupola, and it is a module of windows that where you can look at the top, you can look out this way, and the contrast is on every vehicle until this time, you just had a portal. And if you're looking for Hawaii, as you go over, I mean, you'd have to look exactly the right time and see it. Whereas being able to sort of look and see a place that means something to you, on the earth, and see it as it's coming and spin around, you watch it going. It gives us a human presence.
Hey, Christina, I saw you nodding along.
Yes, I was, because I was just envisioning the cupola as Katie described it. She's exactly right. It is a phenomenal part of station because I think it really brings the human element. I call it the bay window station. It looks down on Earth, and you can actually position yourself in it to where the only thing that you see is the horizon of Earth in 360 degrees and the thin line of the atmosphere around it, and depending whether you're in a night pass or a day pass, either the stars in the universe or, the beautiful continents and oceans below you. And just to recognize that, that view and bringing it home to all the people that got us there, and really answering humanity's call to explore and taking that perspective and bringing it back home is such an important part of our mission, in addition to the great science and the benefits and technology.
Answering humanity's call to explore. We are seeing that today. And this mission is expected to be about 30 to 100 days or a little bit more. What determines how long they'll stay?
They've got certain objectives to meet. This is a test mission, and it just depends what the answers to the questions are as they go along, and also the needs of the space station. And I would think how ready they are to launch in August. One of the things that we always try to keep in mind is the space station is an orbiting laboratory. It's our test place for testing out things for the moon and Mars. And having 2 extra people up there who already know how to get to work, do spacewalks, all those kinds of things is really valuable work.
And what is the plan next? Is there another trip, providing that this is a success and they return without any kind of incident, another trip already planned or anticipated for August?
So for SpaceX, scheduled right now for August, but TBD depending on the results here of testing out this is a test flight. And then also for Boeing, they are in line as well and going to fly their uncrewed mission first.
We do have some news from the president. He spoke briefly to reporters. We just want to mention what he said. He said, quote, "I am so proud of the people of NASA, public and private. When you see a site like that, it's incredible. When you hear that sound, the roar, you can imagine how dangerous it is. I think this is such a great inspiration for our country. Our country is doing well." So the president there to witness this up close. Gio Benitez, one final thought before we wrap up our coverage. You were there close to, you could see it, you could hear it, you could feel it. Your thoughts as you sort of reflect on that incredible moment.
I'm thinking right now, Tom, about Bob and Doug's wives. They are both decorated astronauts themselves, Karen and Megan, and they were watching, knowing exactly what could go wrong and what could go right and what you do when things go wrong, and they were there watching. So I'm thinking about them watching that with their sons right now. Just pretty special to see such a successful launch.
Lindsay, and this is just, it's so great, and I can't stop watching them, and I'm glad we're playing this one more time because it has been such a tough time over the last 3 months in this country. We've just, everything sort of has gone wrong for so many families, whether people getting sick or losing their jobs, and then right now we just have so much unrest because of what's happened in Minnesota, and you get to just sort of pause and see what this country can do when it all works and things come together and ambition meets hope, meets dreams, and it is just incredible. It is amazing to watch, and it's not that we can forget what's happened this week or over the last 3 months, but it's a reminder of what we can do.
Look, on the space front, today signifies a major advancement, right? We have propelled forward, and now I think it's also, we have to be mindful that we have to remember how to get things right back here on Earth, especially as we talk about these protests and what's going on as a result of what happened in Minnesota. But such excitement for a moment to take a breather from that and watch this.
And it's incredible because it's going to be to be continued. This is the first new chapter, and we are going to keep reading this book and keep covering this because it's incredible. This does conclude our coverage of Launch America Mission to Space Live. I want to thank our partners at National Geographic, our ABC team, and special thanks to NASA astronauts Christina Cook and Katie Coleman. For Lindsay Davis and myself, I'll see you later on World News Tonight. Have a good afternoon. Thank you so much for witnessing history with us.
We're glowing in the dark. We've started from the start. We're lights that never go out, like we've never been down. Glowing in the dark. We're lights that apart. We're lights that never go out, 'cause you're here with me now. Dark days burning so bright, so fine. Every night.
flood. 0. Ignition.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
Neighborhoods are underwater.
24/7 streaming news source, ABC News. Imagine breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Imagine instant, incredible access to the most compelling live video. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all the most innovative storytellers, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes. Go there now. ABC News Live. Think of it as your live streaming adrenaline rush.
Just look at all of the smoke here.
Real, raw, live. No matter where the next step takes us, we're taking it.
It's frightening.
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Behind the scenes, exclusive access.
Take you inside for an extraordinary tour here at ABC News Live. This is it.
It's time to go there, be there, experience it, live on the scene. Maybe that's why, in just 1 year, ABC News Live is already America's #1 live streaming news. And imagine this, it's free. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime, streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you. We move up to the vehicle. He detonates the bomb.
The heroes who stopped the killer, who held the city of Austin hostage for 19 days.
It's a tripwire. All hands on deck.
The clues, the Home Depot video, that truck, and the agent who connected the dots.
It was exactly the vehicle that we were looking for.
Inside the investigation,
Advance made contact.
the takedown of the bomber. Now streaming on Hulu.
Right now, how do you make sense of it all?
If you're like me, searching the internet all day and going through social media, it can be terrifying, and that's why we're here.
Now, afternoons on ABC. One place here for you with the good information you need.
How do you help your family, your kids, your friends deal with all of this?
Answering all your questions.
We are all in this together, and we're going to get through this together.
Pandemic, what you need to know. Afternoons at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC.
You're watching a What Would You Do binge block on ABC News Live. Stay tuned for more can't miss moments. What would you do?
Every day we see things, and it's not always pretty. People crossing the line. Sometimes crossing way over the line. When you think no one's watching, would you step up and say something or step away? There are a lot of tough decisions out there.
So the question is, what would you do?
Hi guys, how are you? I have some really good news for you. What? Instead of carrying one of your babies, I'm carrying both. You're actually having twins. No.
Twins? Twins? No. Dear God, no. We told you and everybody else from the very beginning that we wanted
Yeah, and those are our babies. We're not raising twins. No, you need to get rid of one of them.
She is giving them the gift of life. But when this surrogate tells the parents-to-be she's expecting 2 babies instead of 1, they demand a selective reduction. What will other people say? Will they tell this future mom and dad that they should count their blessings and keep both babies? Or will they agree that the parents should not take on more than they bargained for? What would you do?
Get rid of one of them? What are you asking me to do? We're paying you to carry our baby. We decide. We only want one.
It's a real and very serious issue. Biological parents at odds